It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Fatima Nasser from the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. And she's going to talk about women leadership in disaster management, the case of the Beirut blast. Welcome, Fatima, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just want to share my presentation. I think I don't have access to share my presentation.
You should have access.
Yes, yes,
not
no.
to it.
Yes, no. So, hello everyone. My topic I want to present it in this event is on women leadership and disaster management, the case of Beirut blast. So first I will start by the introduction, then literature review, after that the conceptual framework, then the findings, and we'll talk about my publications and my proposal. So just a small background on the Beirut blast. The Beirut blast happened on 4 August 2020. It was caused by tons of ammonium nitrates that caused a material damage and killed more than 100 people and injured around 300,000 people homeless. So a bit background of my research on women and disasters. Women have played an essential role and impact in disaster response and recovery, but their skills are not used as a resource in disaster management. So there is a need for indicate the role of women in disaster risk reduction and to promote their role. And the importance of my research is to contribute more on the literature review of role of women in disaster management by taking the case of Beirut explosion. So the main two research questions are how women's leadership leads to disaster risk reduction and social change in the context of disasters. What is the role of women in disaster management in Lebanon during and after Beirut explosion, and what is their impacts? So the two objects of my research is to broaden the literature review on women leadership in disaster management and to identify its significance in disaster risk reduction. The literature review shows there is no single theoretical framework regarding gender and disaster research. There are four main theoretical approaches. One based on social vulnerability. The second is approach based on feminist theories, and the third relies on development theory, and the fourth gender approach in disaster risk reduction. So based on the theoretical approach, I looked more on the crisis leadership and found that the transformational leadership is more similar to the characteristic of the women leaders, and particularly in crisis management, they support and empower women, grassroots groups, and volunteers in disaster. Based on my literature review and the theoretical approaches, I come up with my conceptual framework, which is women leadership women leaderships leads to disaster risk reduction and social change during and after the disasters. A bit background on women leadership in the Arab world. The Beirut explosion magnified the pre-existing economic and financial problems on all women. There are different challenges that women leaders face in Lebanon and the Arab world, such as patriarchal culture, household workload, policies and legislation and organization culture. And according to the Ms. Sujit Kumar Mohanty, or the Office of UNDRR, they found through the publication that on through documenting experience of mainstream gender and disaster risks that stands as testimony to the many women and the girls who are already stepping up as a leader in disaster risk reduction efforts across the Arab states. So my research is composed on 5 steps. The first is I interviewed and scribes the interviews, and I code the interviews, and then I come up with the thematic analysis and themes. After it, I analyze the first and secondary data. The findings of my research come up with 4 main themes, which are essential role of women during and after Beirut blast. It shows the role of women in led NGOs and local women participation on the ground. The third is the challenges and barriers faced by the women, socially, economically, and politically. The fourth, the motivation and incentives of women, like women groups collaboration, job opportunities, speaking out, morals for women during disaster, and make collaborations. And the fourth, better integration of women leadership during disaster, which self-awareness of empowerment and decision makers in government levels and awareness. So I come up with 3 quotes, main quotes from participants that I interviewed. One of them said that multiple organizations came together and did a coalition so that response to be more towards women and to have gender lens and for women to be taken into consideration in the response and the reform plan. And one also said that when we come to the decision-making levels, unfortunately, I am not sure if women were existent on the table during resistance. I do not know how to respond toward the Beirut blast, which was gender sensitive by the government. Based on the findings and the analysis of the literature review, I come up with a roadmap, which composed with 3 main themes: the feminist charter, the platform, and the creative representative of local community. The feminist charter was which feminist activists and women organizations come up to address the existence of gender equality and seeks to ensure that all women and girls' needs in the disaster response plan. The platform which the UN Women come up with and collaborate with several feminists and NGOs in Lebanon, and they come up with platform to monitor the disaster plan to ensure women inclusion for long term. And the third, they create the local communities to indicate the local community needs. So based on my thesis, I wrote with my advisor, Dr. Tania Haddad, my publications on assessing gender leadership and culture aspects for disaster response in developing context, focusing on the case of Beirut explosion. It was published on the Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Nature Hazard Science. And my publication focusing on the women's leadership in decision-making, facilitating more equitable disaster response and support access for marginalized group. This was not mentioned in my thesis, so I mentioned and studied in my publication. To continue my study, I'm looking for study on basically on decision-making and women leadership in disaster management. And so basically my proposal is based on this question: how does the inclusion of women in leadership roles during crisis significantly impact decision-making, inclusive and effectiveness? And what evidence-based tools and policies can be proposed to ensure their meaningful and comprehensive inclusion in crisis and disaster management, considering the transformative effects of women leadership on organizational resilience, volunteerism, and community initiatives? Yes, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Fatima. Just to introduce myself to the audience, I'm Professor Amanda Gous, and I have a research chair in gender politics at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. Fatima, I think, I would like you to elaborate on what women actually did as part of disaster management. It wasn't very clear. I mean, I see you're trying to link it to transformational leadership. But if you can tell us more about the blast and what women did and how they managed to do all of that in COVID, because that was right in the time of COVID, right?
Yes, true.
Yes. So if you can elaborate on that.
Sure. I will just share one of the slides with the table that shows everything, which basically the findings and the roles of women. So, which I mentioned in my thesis. And basically to come up with 4 teams. The first one talked about the role of women-led NGOs in assessment and aid distribution and mental health science, health service and decision making, which was very late, but it's very little. Relief operations, advocacy and awareness, renovating houses. So most of the women, they were on the forefront, on the ground, helping people, and particularly NGOs, they were more women helping the affected people. And also from my interviews, I saw that also local women who are affected and not affected, they come to help on the ground and volunteering and guidance, and also psychological support. Some of local NGOs, which led by women grassroots, they come with going around and asking people for help, psychological support, and also distributing any of aid. And yes, and one of these interviews also I come up with motivations through this experience that women worked on during the blast. So one of the women started to speak out regarding this issues regarding gender representations and disaster plan of the international organizations. Yes, Dr. Sauna. Do you want to ask a question, Dr. Sauna?
Yes, I actually do have I'm fascinated by your approach. First of all, I loved your slides.
Thank you.
They're so different from the way PowerPoint or whatever, presentations look. So I'm going to copy some of your ideas the next time I make them. But I think my question is a variation of Professor Gous' question. It's, one of the challenges that women face, women do so much grassroots and community work, right? One of the challenges they face in moving beyond the grassroots level to political leadership positions is that their work is invisible. And their work is invisible because often in studies, in reports, we write it up in these aggregates of first order, second order, aggregate dimension. We generalize it. And in your 3 quotations, you see the flavor of what women may have actually said. So I think my variation on the previous question would be to ask you to tell me about the most interesting, I assume that you were doing in-depth interviews, the most interesting conversation you had, just as if we were having tea together. Because I think that then I will remember that what is on the findings on the table in a much more realistic way. Just thinking of my way of learning. But
yes,
so that when we then narrate these stories and we report these conversations in that sense, we make a stronger case for people to say, wow, that was such an amazing thing, because then we have a clear picture of the thing that was done. So I invite you to tell me a story.
Yes. So one of the interviewees, she talked about a very touching story on one of the affected women who her daughter was died from the blast, and she was very, very sad, but although she was very strong, because her daughter had a museum and was also destroyed by the blast. So the mother did not stop the work of her died daughter, and she continued her work, and she renovated the museum of her daughter. So this will show the resilience of the women who were affected by the blast, and also because the shock of the blast, and you will consider that people, they will not go to this affected people during the blast to help each other, but one of the one of the surprise things that there were a lot of women, volunteer women that came from all of the area of Lebanon, came to help the affected people. And I think I show some picture in my slides. You see this woman, most of them, they are not in Beirut. They come from south, from north, to help to clean the roads and to help the people they were affected. Yes, basically that's it. And also the very much good intervention regarding when women grassroots and women-led NGOs, they come together because before blast they were not in good relations, each one working in several projects, but in the blast they collaborate together to come up with a gender disaster plan, which basically include everything women needs and in all aspects. So this one of the, and it's a few things that I remember. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Can you tell us, if you would compare the work of that women did versus the work that men did after the blast, what would you say are the differences?
You mean different acts that women work?
Well, I mean, what did men do? If this was what the women did, what did the men do? That they did not build communities, or what did they do?
Yes, they did support on the ground, and they did basically also they were more on the government level, taking the decisions. They were on the ground on also on government level, but there is a lack of women in the government level decision making. There was no representative in the government level woman taking any sort of decisions. And one of the interviews mentioned that although they were very active on the ground, very active in humanitarian actions, but when taking a governmental decisions, they don't have.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I have another one. I have a lot of curiosity about this case, so I have lots of questions. You know, one of the stereotypical things we learn about Lebanese politics is, of course, the sectarian differences that shape the political system in Lebanon. And there's another cliche about disasters, a horrible one, is that they're everything that is a disruption on that scale is actually an opportunity to rebuild. So I'm looking at three pieces of this. Women working from all over the country at the grassroots in Beirut. I'm looking at this sort of unifying disaster, and I'm wondering, was this also a time when some of those bridges were built in the groups that were working, or did people just work in their own?
On their own sects, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think each one work in its own sects. It's basically collaboration with NGOs and the international NGOs on the ground. This is the first time we see it. But regarding the sects, from what I see, there is no collaboration. But each one of them, they have the same goal to help people. And yes, so yes, unfortunately, I didn't see any collaboration in sects or anything. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a bit more about the NGOs? I mean, what type of NGOs were they? Were they on the level of the United Nations or more transnational?
Yes, some of them, they were women grassroots. They work on the ground, and basically local women, communities, they come up together and worked on AIDS and mental health services. And also there is a big NGOs, women-led NGOs, very well-known NGOs, also come with supporting and helping. And for the international level, the UN Women played a very important role to meet with several NGOs and feminists and collaborate to make advocacy for the gender disaster plan. Yes, so basically they were these three types of NGOs. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, there is a question from Manuel Antonio Duran. Maybe Dr. Amanda, you would like to read it as moderator on the chat box?
In the chat box, let me have a look. You mentioned challenges and barriers, but how about opportunities to women leadership? Can you talk about those opportunities?
Yes, some of the women, they started speaking out in social media, on the ground, regarding women rights, especially regarding violence and discrimination and towards during the blast and after it. So they speak out. They were very strong to talk about these issues, and also more collaboration. I mentioned before, women groups, they come together, and also more roles for women during disaster. We see that women can help during disaster, and this opportunity and come with a lot of women help on the ground, and but not on the government level. Yes.
Do you think that those opportunities that were created in 2020 with the blast, are they continuing? Do they have sort of a effect over time?
Yes, I think so. Yes. Maybe the platform and the feminine search that they come up with after the blast, they did several projects to continue on disaster plan, on advocacy on gender and disaster plan. But we didn't see anything regarding decision making there's no was big role in advocating decision-making roles of women in the government.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for you, Dr. Fatima.
Yes.
For sure, women during this blast, I've been following the blast as well as like many people in the world. But my concern was about the displaced women, because in any blast or any war, there are people who are displaced, and we know that, you know, Lebanon is in a place where it's not, you know, easy geopolitically speaking. You know, with the wars, continuous, like there is like political instability in the country right now. Can you tell us whether there was a high number of displaced women, and what about the role of like international community like the UN? Were there any rescues? Because, you know, with the blast, women lost their shelters. Also, there was an issue of hygiene. So women that are in the age of reproductivity. So are there any, can you tell us a little bit about this? Thank you.
Yes, sure. I remember one of my interviews was a leading NGO's house renovation. And she mentioned that most of the affected people were women during the blast, and they help some of them, they help them to renovate their houses and their business also. There was a small business companies that were destroyed by the blast, and it was led by the women. So they assist them in renovating their small businesses and also their houses. But for this, there were a lot of displaced marginalized group, because the area affected people that some of them were refugees, Palestinian refugees. So they were displaced to another camp. I think the international organization played on this role, helping this marginalized group find another places, another houses. Yes, so most of them, they were women, and also, you know, families that were displaced from their houses.
Do you know where did they go, or where were they displaced? I'm just curious.
Yes, I'm not sure for the places, but for me, I know that for the refugees, they were displaced for another camp in Beirut and in the north. Yes.
There is Dr. Amanda. There is a
in the chat
question from Dr. Sainala.
And there's one before that as well, a comment.
Yeah, there is a comment and the question. Comment
Yeah.
from Brahim Busaid from Morocco, and then a question from Dr. Sainala.
So what I can see here is that, thinking about women, there are some variations in them. For instance, older, younger, wealthy, poor, educated, and less educated. Did you notice any patterns in the social status of women who were able to play an active role in the response?
Yes, basically that the women who, as I mentioned, the refugees women, or they have lower social status, they were affected. So they mainly they were getting the help from the women who are working on the NGOs, or the women who came from different area of Lebanon to help on this. But most of these women who helped, they were working with NGOs, and they volunteered. Yani they can help on during the blast.
Okay. So I mean, those intersectionalities, they, the area that was hit by the blast, with that sort of where you had the refugees and people who were migrants, or was it a mix of people?
They were a mix of people. There were Lebanese and there were also refugees. Some of them, they lost their business because it was destroyed, and some of them lost their houses. Others also their refugee camp, and there's several social status. But basically, the women who helped on in disaster risk reduction, they were working on the NGOs, and they are volunteered from several areas. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to just read here as a comment. Many grassroots organizations help in the effort to rebuild and spread awareness. Social media played a key role in reporting people's issues on the ground. For instance, YouTubers, all genders reported on the ground and helped the relief program. So do you want to say something about the use of social media?
Yes, the social media played important role regarding recording how much the people helped and volunteered in during the blasts and the renovation and distributing aid, and especially also regarding the women's rights, as mentioned before. Some of the women, they speak out regarding the violence and discrimination that they were affected during the blast and during when they were helping the people. So yes, I think that social media helped in showing the relief, and also to speaking out with several social issues.
So was it Facebook? Was it, do you have WhatsApp in Lebanon?
Yes, we have WhatsApp. Yes. Then WhatsApp also it's used to news, to the live news also. And there are a lot of channels also news and on WhatsApp where it always shows the live news.
Brahim has another question.
Where?
Brahim Busaid, or Dr. Brahim Busaid, has got a question. He just submitted a question, Dr. Amanda.
I don't, maybe you want to read it, Yasmin, because I don't see it.
Sure. Is the issue a leadership problem or rather a political one?
For my research, I looked on the leadership role of women, and I was looking on the role of specific of women during and after the disaster. And from the findings, I saw that there is a lot of roles of women on the ground, and they played a very important, impactful role in disaster risk reduction. But in the governmental level, in decision-making process, there was the lack of any act regarding for women to take a decision in disaster management level.
So in a sense, it is a political problem in the sense that women do the work that the government has to do.
Yes.
In that sense. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Swarna? Yasmin?
Yeah, so Dr. Fatima, my question is, what is next? Do you think that these things could be, do you think that there might be a solution to all this? Do you think that there is a glimpse of hope, when it comes to women's role in approaching this problem, specifically the Lebanese? Because as far as I know, the Lebanese women are vocal, they're there, but you sometimes don't feel that. You know that they're there, you know, there is kind of, even the system itself allows women, you know, to drive, to have the freedom to talk. We could see them in the social media, but there is no sight in there. So what is your personal, you know, I want to know your personal opinion on this.
Yes, yes, true. I thought that women are very strong, particularly the women who are in political role, MP, or also leading NGOs and political groups. There is a hope for change, but it will take time. I think there are a lot of feminist groups and also women groups that are working on integrating women in the governmental level and leadership level in politics. But it will take time because there's still some challenges, and I think working and for the goal of more integration of women in political level decision making, it can work, but it will be very gradually. Yes.
How many women do you have in your government? Do you know?
Yes, I think 3 MPs.
Yeah, that's very few. And
yes.
you have never considered a quota. Has there ever been a debate on a quota system?
No, they worked in. I think they are not working on a bigger level. They worked in like one of the MPs are working with the international organizations and just working on the women issues and children issues. But one come up with big decisions regarding changing any policies for women rights in the government, doesn't have any impact on it. So they worked in a basic things, I think. Yes, but what I see from my previous years, it's gradually improving because these MPs were not representative in the last years. So I think gradually it will be more improved, and we'll see more women in political level. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Swarna, you have another question? Anybody else?
Anyone from the audience?
If we can stop sharing, then I can see the audience, because right now I cannot see. Yeah, that's better. Okay. All right. Anything you would like to say in closing, Fatima?
Just hoping, because I'm continuing my study regarding more on how to improve the role of women in decision making. I hope that we'll find more good information and good data regarding this, and also will make any recommendations, good recommendation and good implementation to give a role for women in disaster and decision making. Yes.
Well, what I can say is that you may want to look at the political angle at that, because you know that there's really a big difference between what men and women do. And so if we talk about the gendered analysis, it's often good to look at that type of comparison to see how are women located in society, that do they have power, and to what extent do they have power, and what how do they actually gain power through what they do. So I think to look at it through a gendered lens is I think will help you to expand your ideas. Yeah,
That's true.
I would like to add to that actually I would use a lot more storytelling in this, because I think that's the missing piece. I really do. We have the generalities. We've had like 75 years of United Nations generalizations about women's empowerment and leadership, but what we don't have is the example of the person in the neighborhood who did this, which then resulted in that, and that. So the more of that fills your next work or your next presentation, I think the more impactful. And one place to link this is, I think there's a growing literature. The Women, Peace and Security agenda of the UN is a very limited one, but people are using it as if it's malleable, and they're pulling it in many directions. And one is actually to look at the relevance of the 4 pillars of 1325 in situations exactly like this, which are a little bit disaster, a little bit conflict recovery. How do you then map the work that women are actually doing, so that then when it comes to creating the peace table, these are the women that you're calling in there. So I think that's another lens that you could draw in profitably, very directly into your work. There is a connection that's just waiting to be made for your case.
Yeah. I think that's an important point that Dr. Swana make, is to look at also the UN's work and that specific resolution. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for giving your seminar, Fatima. It was very interesting, and thank you for everybody who attended.